Well, we're now going live to Westminster to Gloria DiPiero and Christopher Hope for Prime Minister's Questions Live.
Yes, it's that time of the week when we are asking you to send your questions about what PMQs, what you'd be asking the Prime Minister or indeed the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer.
So please send us your questions, tell us who you are and where you're from. We'd really like to know where you're from so we can put it to our panel. The email address is gbviews@gbnews.com because PMQs Live is all about you listening or watching. It's not all about you, Bev and Andrew, but we are going to ask you, what would you ask the Prime Minister if you had a Prime Minister's question today?
I'm asking the Prime Minister this. Prime Minister, do you think Penny Mordaunt, the Leader of the Commons, would make a very fine Prime Minister? And if so, are you going to resign?
And I would probably ask him, given that Donald Trump has said that if anything transpires that Harry lied on his visa application, would the Prime Minister launch a defence to keep the Duke of Sussex in America?
We don't want him here.
Well, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Bev. Great questions, but it's fast approaching midday.
This is GB News, Britain's election channel. PMQs Live starts right now. The time is 11:57 on Wednesday, the 20th of March. This is PMQs Live on GB News with Gloria DiPiero and Christopher Hope.
In just one moment, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer, the Leader of the Opposition, go head-to-head for Prime Minister's questions. We'll have full coverage of every moment, every spit and every cough, and get reaction from Cabinet Office Minister Esther McVey and Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell.
So, let's start with our panel. We've got a couple of minutes before we go live to the House of Commons. Labour's Lucy Powell, what should your leader, Keir Starmer, be talking about today?
Well, he might want to ask when the general election's going to be, because since last Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister ruled out May. His Chancellor yesterday seemed to hint that it was going to be October. So let's set the date. Let's get that general election penciled in and then we know where we're at.
Esther McVey?
Well, since Rishi Sunak said in January it will be the second part of the year, that was his working assumption. The only people who've been talking up May elections has been the Labour Party. Nobody's ever said May. So we can put that to bed straight away. I tell you one thing Labour won't be going on, and that is the inflation figures. Rishi Sunak held his nerve. He said he's going to turn the country round and inflation is coming down. So much so, in fact, they think it'll be to 2% a year ahead of what expectations were. So Rishi, he is a finance guy. We need that person to turn the country round, and he is doing it.
Lucy, you heard Andrew Pearce's question there. He said, should the new leader be Penny Mordaunt? You're the opponent for Penny Mordaunt in the House of Commons chamber. Would you worry more about Penny than Rishi as the Tory leader?
Well, look, I am. I'm up against Penny every week, and she's a very formidable performer in the House of Commons. Not sure quite how that works behind the scenes, whether she's can take the big decisions the country need. But look, I mean, I think the last thing the country wants right now, surely, is yet another changing of the guard, yet more chaos with this Conservative government that seems to be more divided every day that passes.
Who's placing all these stories? We keep reading them one day. Well, not just one day. It's Penny Mordaunt, or maybe it's Tom Tugendhat. I mean, who's placing them, Esther McVey?
You know, it's right to say there is a handful of disgruntled members of Parliament, absolutely. Penny had her chance to become the leader. She didn't win. So, you know, that's where it is, goes to bed. So Penny won't be the leader, it's Rishi Sunak. However, when we did those 10 Rwandan votes the other night, we were there for hours. I spoke to all the Conservative MPs and they fully support him, except for those disgruntled ones. So if there was a vote of confidence in Rishi Sunak, he'd win by a country mile.
Is it quite... Why not have it now, then, and sort of lance the boil of this?
What?
A vote of no confidence.
Why would you do that? You don't need to do that. He's the Prime Minister, and I think today, with the turning of the economy, with the global investment that he's got in, £32 billion, Nissan investing here, Google investing here, that's what we want to see.
The economy's getting better, that's Esther's point. The plan is working, is what the government say.
Well, look, I mean, inflation has come down, but let's be clear about it. Prices are still going up. They're just going up by a bit less than they were before. We've seen the biggest fall in living standards ever in history.
We are going live to the House of Commons. It's Prime Minister.
I know the whole House will join me in congratulating Vaughan Gething on his election as Welsh Labour leader and expected election as First Minister of Wales, and also offering Mark Drakeford our best wishes on his retirement. The government I lead will always work tirelessly to benefit the lives of people across the United Kingdom, and I look forward to working constructively with the new First Minister to deliver for the people of Wales. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Just Water.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Clacton have had a tough time with the cost of living, and I'm doing everything I can. I am doing everything I can to support them. With that in mind, does he agree with me, my right honourable friend, agree with me that cutting inflation is the very best way to do that? And that today's statistics are very welcome, and can he reassure my constituents that he'll continue working hard to get inflation as low as possible, to protect their savings, help with their bills, and give them the financial security they deserve?
Well, Mr. Speaker, today's figures show that our plan is working. Inflation has fallen to 3.4% from its peak over 11%, down by almost 70%. The steepest fall since the 80s, and now at the lowest level since September 2021. And people's pay packets are going further, with real wages growing for 8 months in a row and taxes being cut by £900 for the average worker. And that is why we need to stick to the plan to deliver a brighter future for our country.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for his words in welcoming Vaughan Gething to his post as First Minister of Wales. As the first black leader of any European government, it's a historic moment that speaks to the progress and values of modern-day Wales. And I also pay tribute to Mark Drakeford for his long, steady service in Wales. Mr. Speaker, violent prisoners released early because the Tories wrecked the criminal justice system. 3,500 small boat arrivals already this year because the Tories lost control of the borders. The NHS struggling to see people because the Tories broke it. Millions paying more on their mortgages. A budget that hit pensioners. A £46 billion hole in his sums. Why is the Prime Minister so scared to call an election?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said in January, my working assumption is that the election will be in the second half of the year. But I must say, I thought that out of everybody, he'd actually be the most grateful, Mr. Speaker, because he's now actually got time to come up with a plan for Britain. We're all looking forward to finally seeing it.
We're ready. Just call it. Just call it. But, Mr. Speaker, he talks a plan. Let's just take his Rwanda policy. When they first announced this gimmick, they claimed it would settle tens of thousands of people. The Home Office then whittled it down to a mere 300. 4 times that number have already arrived this month, and the backlog stands at 130,000. Can the Prime Minister see any flaw in his plan to deport less than 1% of that backlog?
Mr. Speaker, since I became Prime Minister, the number of small boat crossings are actually down by over a third, Mr. Speaker. And that's because we've doubled National Crime Agency funding, we've increased the illegal enforcement raids by 70%, we've closed 7,500 bank accounts, deported 24,000 illegal migrants, and processed over 112,000 cases, more than at any point in the last 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. And it's crystal clear, as we're seeing from the Labour Party's opposition in this House, while we're committed to stopping the boats, the Labour Party would keep them coming.
The tragedy is, we know the Prime Minister doesn't even believe in the Rwanda gimmick. He tried to stop funding it, but he's now so diminished that his entire focus is stopping his MPs holding the sword of Damocles above his head, perhaps even literally in the case of the Leader of the House. His great hope is to percolate his party with a couple of empty planes, praying they won't notice when the flights stop going, the boat's still coming, and the costs keep mounting. How has he managed to spend £600 million of taxpayer money on a gimmick to deport 300 people.
Mr. Speaker, it's crystal clear. Not only does the Labour Party not have a plan to fix this issue, but the truth is they don't actually care about fixing this issue. When he talks about the gangs, when we gave the police new powers to crack down on the people smuggling gangs, he spent months campaigning and voting against it. But thanks to our new laws, 900 criminals have been arrested. 450 have been convicted, serving over 370 years behind bars. If it was up to him, those criminals would still be out on our streets, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, if he wasn't the Labour leader, he'd still want to be their lawyer.
Speaker, I've prosecuted more people smugglers than he's had helicopter rides, and that's a lot. And this, I've done it. Rwanda gimmick is going to cost the taxpayer £2 million for every one of his 300 people that they deport. And I know the Prime Minister likes to spend a lot on jet setting, but that's some plane ticket. It's the cost of Tory chaos, and it's working people who are paying the price. The man he made his immigration minister let the cat out of the bag when he said the Prime Minister's symbolic flights will not provide a credible deterrent. And we know the Prime Minister himself thought it wouldn't work. If the people selling this gimmick don't believe in it, why should the country?
Mr. Speaker, he's very keen to talk about who he prosecuted. He's a bit less keen to talk about when he defended Hizbut Tahrir, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to this question of how to deal with people who are here illegally, his values are simply not those of the British people. After all, this is the person who campaigned to stop the deportation of foreign dangerous criminals, Mr. Speaker. A dangerous criminal was jailed for dealing Class A drugs after he fought to keep him here. A gangmaster was convicted of carrying a knife after he fought to keep him here. So whether it's representing terrorists or campaigning for criminals, it's clear whose side he's on, and it's not the British people.
It's genuinely sad to see him reduced to this nonsense. And let's take another example that I started with. After 14 years of Tory chaos in the prison system, the Justice Secretary is reduced to begging the Prime Minister either to send fewer offenders to prison or to release them even earlier. I must have got sympathy for anyone trying to get an answer out of the Prime Minister. So what's it going to be? Fewer criminals behind bars in the first place, or more released early onto our streets? Which is it?
Mr. Speaker, thanks to our record and plan, violent crime has fallen by 50%, Mr. Speaker. We've recruited more police officers, given them more powers, and kept serious offenders in prison for longer. What's his record? He voted against greater protection for our emergency workers, opposed tougher sentences for violent criminals, and failed to give police the powers they need. It would be back to square one with Labour, soft on crime and soft on criminals.
You can see why he doesn't want an election, why his party have lost faith in him, why half his cabinet are lining up to replace him. No answers, no plan, no clue. And the Prime Minister has never had the courage to stand up to his party. So let me help him out and say to them what he wishes he could. The mortgage mayhem, the waiting list, the criminals walking free, they are the costs of Tory chaos. And if they can't bring themselves to stop the endless games and gimmicks, stop putting themselves before country, they should pack up, go home and waste somebody else's time. It wasn't that difficult, was it, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, he talks...
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about his ideas, but we're 2 weeks on from the budget. The Shadow Chancellor found time to make a 1-hour speech last night, and we still don't know how they're going to pay for their £28 billion black hole. But while he tries to talk down Britain and the progress that we are making, today's news shows that the plan is working. Inflation down, Mr. Speaker. Energy bills down. Wages up, pensions up, and taxes cut by £900. And that is the choice. Higher taxes and back to square one with Labour, or tax cuts and real change with the Conservatives.
Mr. Speaker, the UK birth rate is falling, while those requiring fertility treatment to conceive is rising. There are no employment rights attached to those undertaking fertility treatment, no paid time off work. Would the Prime Minister join me in encouraging employers, large and small, across the United Kingdom to sign up to the Fertility Workplace Pledge, which I have launched with Fertility Matters at Work, LGBT Mummies, Fertility Network UK and many others to support those undertaking fertility when they're in work?
Well, can I start by thanking my honourable friend for her excellent work campaigning on this issue. And she is right, employers should offer their staff understanding, support and flexibility whilst they're undergoing fertility treatment. And the best way to improve the experience of those undergoing treatment, both women and their partners, is through voluntary approaches. And that's why I would join her encouraging all companies to sign up to the Fertility Workplace Pledge.
SNP Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, with his backbenchers looking for a unity candidate to replace him, which of the now numerous born-again Thatcherites on the Labour front bench does he believe best fits the bill?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was surprising to hear all this talk about the 1970s from the Shadow Chancellor in particular. But then if you see what's happening in places like Birmingham, where taxes are going up by 21%, Mr. Speaker, services are being cut, whether it's social care, children's services, or indeed in some streets, literally the lights are being turned off. It was unsurprising why they're talking about the 70s, and I can just say what they've done to Birmingham, the Conservatives will never let them do to Britain.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, there's a serious point to be made here, because the IFS have warned of the conspiracy of silence which exists between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party when it comes to £18 billion of looming public sector cuts. Indeed, just last night, they actually outlined that the fiscal rules of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are in effect identical. So with such continuity on offer, Mr. Speaker, the public are right to be anti-Westminster, aren't they?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised to hear him quoting the IFS, because the IFS also described the recent SNP budget as, in their words, misleading, and said in their words that pain is almost certainly coming. It is a savage tax and acts budget, Mr. Speaker, a savage tax and acts budget. Because here's the reality of it: whilst NHS spending in England is going up.
We're going now live to a statement from Leah Varadkar, the Irish Taoiseach, who is resigning.
Of a national living wage, statutory sick pay, lower personal taxes, improved family leave, allowing parents to spend more time with their children in those crucial early years. I'm happy that during my time as Taoiseach we were able to honour my commitment to double spending on the arts, culture and sport. This is making a real difference now and will continue to do so into the future, fostering and assisting the artists and the sportsmen and women of the future. We provided leadership by increasing our spending on international development, and we've expanded our diplomatic footprint around the world, building on Ireland's already considerable soft power. The National Broadband Plan is underway, bringing fibre-based internet connections to every home, school, business and farm and community in Ireland, which the critics said shouldn't be done. We've established the technology universities and the Rural Development Fund, and since 2011 we've quadrupled overall annual investment in public infrastructure, That's meant considerably more investment in priorities like housing, healthcare facilities, school buildings and climate action. And I am deeply proud that we, as Irish people, welcomed over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees to our shores when they needed our protection, notwithstanding the challenges this brings. In my time as Taoiseach, we reduced consistent poverty and income inequality. Housing construction has more than doubled, with 500 people becoming homeowners each week for the first time, the highest number in almost 2 decades. Of course, there are areas in which we have been much less successful, and some in which we have sadly gone backwards. But I hope you'll forgive me if I leave it to others to point them out on a day like this. They will receive plenty of airtime and column space. When I became party leader and Taoiseach back in June 2017, I knew that one part of leadership is knowing when the time has come to pass on the baton to somebody else, and then having the courage to do it. That time is now. So I am resigning as President and Leader of Fine Gael effective today, and will resign as Taoiseach as soon as my successor is able to take up that office. I've asked our Party General Secretary and Executive Council to provide for the new leader to be elected in advance of the Ardèche on Saturday, April 16th, thus allowing a new Taoiseach to be elected when the Dáil resumes after the Easter break. I know this will come as a surprise to many people and a disappointment to some, and I hope at least you will understand my decision. I know that others will, how shall I put it, cope with the news just fine. That is the great thing about living in a democracy. There's never a right time to resign high office. However, this is as good a time as any. Budget 2024 is done. Negotiations have not yet commenced on the next one. The institutions of the Good Friday Agreement are working again, and our trading relationship with the UK in the post-Brexit era is settled and stable. The new Taoiseach will have a full 2 months to prepare for the local and European elections, and up to a year before the next general election. My reasons for stepping down are both personal and political. I believe this government can be re-elected, and I believe my party, Fine Gael, can gain seats in the next Dáil. Most of all, I believe the re-election of this three-party government would be the right thing for the future of our country, continuing to take us forward, protecting all that's been achieved and building on it. But after careful consideration...
The Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar announcing his resignation there. We're going straight back to the House of Commons. This is PMQs Live.
For legal migration about how best to accommodate a smaller number of asylum seekers safely at RAF Scampton, whilst recognising the Council's ambitious plans for regeneration. And let me tell him, I fully support those discussions, and the Government is committed to the site being used for accommodation for the shortest possible time and then released to the benefit of the local community.
Mr. Speaker, our NHS is at breaking point. My constituent was told he needed a gallbladder operation after a visit to A&E. He waited in hospital, nil by mouth, all day, no operation. He's then told to stay overnight or risk his place on the list. So he sits in a hot, smelly, windowless waiting room for 8 hours on a plastic chair. Then a gurney comes with no pillow, and that's where he sleeps. And the next day, the nurses say, no operation, there just aren't any beds. His wife told me the Conservatives are running the NHS into the ground. Given his experience, given so many others across the country sharing that experience, how can he say otherwise?
I'm very sorry to hear about the Honourable Lady's constituent experience, and I'm sure she'll be raising it with the local NHS Trust as well. What I would say is, of course, the NHS is recovering from a difficult 2 years, but it has received considerable backing from this government, record investment, as was acknowledged by the NHS CEO just the other week, a plan to improve productivity in the future. And when it comes to beds, we've invested in 5,000 new beds over the last year, more ambulances, and all of that is contributing to lower waiting times, waiting lists coming down, and an improved A&E performance over last year.
Angela Richards.
Mr. Speaker, the people of the eastern villages of Guildford, the Clandons, the Horsleys, Effingham, Ripley, Send and Ockham have had enough. Unwanted development and villages taken out of the Greenbelt without promised infrastructure is why I've been calling for an immediate review of the local plan for the last 3 years. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that Labour's promise of concreting over the Greenbelt, even against the wishes of local MPs, would simply add insult to injury?
Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike both the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, who believe in top-down targets that decimate the Greenbelt, we believe in local people having a say over their local communities, which is why we are committed to protecting and enhancing the Greenbelt. The national planning policy includes strong protections to safeguard this important land. I know her local plan is currently under review by the council, who have indicated they'll be updating it, and I hope the honourable member and her constituents engage with that process to help shape future Guildford for future generations.
Kendrick.
Mr. Speaker, the EU Foreign Policy High Representative Joseph Borrell said on Monday that Israel is provoking famine in Gaza and using starvation as a weapon of war. President Biden has said that there should be no attack on Rafah without a plan to ensure the safety of more than 1 million people living there. Does the Prime Minister agree with High Representative Borrell and President Biden? Because I do, and we need a ceasefire. If he does agree, would he say so here in the chamber today?
Well, so as the honourable gentleman knows, I've explained opposition repeatedly, but the findings from the IPC are gravely concerning. It's clear that the status quo is unsustainable and we need urgent action now to avoid a famine. The UK is doing all it can to get more aid in and to prevent a worsening crisis. 2,000 tonnes of UK-funded food aid, including flour and hot meals, is being distributed by the World Food Programme in Gaza today, as we speak, enough to feed more than 275,000 people, and we will continue to do everything we can to alleviate the suffering that people are experiencing.
Sir Bill Wiggin, closed question.
Question number 9, sir.
Mr. Speaker, the Department for Education is mounting a significant intervention in Herefordshire's children's services. That includes expert improvement advice, a commissioner with statutory powers to direct the council, and a 2-year improvement partnership with Leeds. And I can assure my honourable friend that the department is closely monitoring the council's progress.
Sir Bill Wiggin.
I thank my right honourable friend for taking this situation, this terrible situation, so seriously. The Permanent Secretary from the Department of Education visited Hereford recently, and so he will know that the new Conservative Council are trying to mend the damage done by the previous Green and Independent Authority to far too many young people and their families. As a father, does he agree with me that progress is still far too slow? And so will he meet me and discuss what more we can do?
Well, like my honourable friend, I am concerned to hear that children in Herefordshire are not receiving the level of service that they should expect. And I know that ministers have revisited the Commissioner's latest report, and while some improvements have been made, I agree with him. It's also very clear that the pace of change is not what it should be. My honourable friend has been right to campaign tirelessly on this. I assure him ministers continue to hold the local authority for account, but of course I will be happy to meet with him to discuss his concerns further.
Hamid Yassin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Bedford Renal Unit is closed until further notice, while investigation into the water treatment unit are carried out. This is a major incident for the nearly 100 patients in Bedford, whose lives are now severely disrupted by the need to travel around 50 miles up to 4 times a week to access life-saving kidney dialysis. Will the Prime Minister commit all the necessary resources needed by East and North Hertfordshire Renal Unit services to urgently fix this major issue?
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the specific issue with the renal unit. I think he'll forgive me not being familiar with the exact details, but I'll make sure that we look into it in the department and that the NHS is being provided with all the support that they need to rectify the situation.
Sir Liam Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow is World Down Syndrome Day. We have made huge innovative strides in this country with the unanimous passing of the Down Syndrome Act in this House, and initiatives such as yours, Mr. Speaker, to provide work placements here in the Palace of Westminster for people with Down syndrome. There is an outstanding issue we have to deal with, however. While the time limit on abortion in the UK is 24 weeks gestation, For Down syndrome, due to an anomaly in the law, it is 40 weeks up to full term, something that many members may not understand. With cross-party support, I will be tabling an amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill to equalise the time limit in line with our disability and equality legislation. Surely we cannot accept in the 21st century that people with Down syndrome are second-class citizens in our country. Will the Prime Minister support the change?
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend for his dedicated work in passing the Down Syndrome Act into law. And can I thank him also for highlighting World Down Syndrome Day, where we'll be hosting a reception in number 10 to mark the occasion. As he knows, when the grounds for abortion were amended, Parliament agreed that doctors were best placed to make those difficult decisions with women and their families. And also, as he knows, it's been a long-standing convention that it would be for Parliament to decide whether to make any changes to the law on abortion, and that these issues have always been treated as an individual matter of conscience.
Anna Bardell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Some of my Livingston constituents in Broxburn and Craigshill have the misfortune of living in houses built with rack concrete. Many of them can't get insurance, can't get mortgages, and one constituent told me very emotionally he cannot even afford a survey. So will the Prime Minister arrange for his ministers to meet with me to discuss how his government can fund local authority and devolve governments that didn't even exist when these houses were built, and give the support that was promised? We need action now.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd happily look into the issue that the Honourable Lady raises, but in the first instance, I'm sure it would be a question for the SNP government in Scotland to answer, to make sure that they're providing for their constituents. We have a strong track record of investing in local communities right across Scotland with our levelling up funding and investment partnerships. But when it comes to housing, obviously she'll know that that's a devolved area, but I'll happily look into the issue that she raises.
Andrew Rosendale.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Prime Minister should be aware that the people of Romford are appalled by the catastrophic reign of the current Mayor of London. So, does he agree that traditional boroughs like Havering should have more independence from City Hall? But in the meantime, to save London, shouldn't we sack Sadiq and elect Susan Hall as the next Mayor of our capital?
Well, can I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Romford's championing of his area and his passion to preserve its character. Now, as he says, whilst there aren't current plans to redraw the boundaries, I can understand his desire, especially with London being run by the Labour Mayor, with nightlife being decimated, crime increasing, and the Mayor raising taxes on hard-working people by over 8%. London can certainly, Mr. Speaker, do better, and the only way for pride to be restored in London is with Susan Hall as its new London Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last Sunday was the second anniversary of P&O Ferry's illegal sacking of 786 British seafarers. And despite what ministers have said, P&O has faced no sanction, and this government's new code of practice on fire and rehire would not stop it happening again. This Parliament will be the worst on record for living standards, and real wages are still worth less than they were in 2008. So why, after 14 years, has this government failed to deliver a better deal for workers across Britain?
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, as the Chancellor just recently pointed out, living standards are £1,700 higher in real terms than they were in 2010. And if he wants to do something to protect working people in this country, perhaps he should have a chat with his Shadow Chancellor about her plans to impose £28 billion of tax rises on everyone in our country.
Sarah Atherton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After decades of a Labour MP, Wrexham was known as Spice Town, but not anymore. In the last 4 years, we've become a city with a £160 million investment zone, £20 million town fund, £23 million share prosperity fund. We're soon to have the largest trading state in Europe with more jobs than job seekers. We've secured the future of Hightown Bank, and Hollywood has boosted our football club. Agree with me that it's this Conservative MP and this Conservative government.
My honourable friend has been an excellent campaigner for Wrexham, putting it on the map after years of decline under the Labour Party, the heart of one of Wales's investment zones, with our plan for towns helping to regenerate the local high street and improve public safety. And I can tell my honourable friend, with such a great campaigner like herself, the next 5 years will only look brighter for Wrexham.
Ashley Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Prime Minister rightly called Conservative Party donor Frank Hester's comments about the Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington racist. It has since emerged that Mr. Hester has made comments that a group of Indian members of staff should climb on the roof, like on the roof of a train, and has made reference to Asian Corner. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that these comments are racist? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, I addressed this last week, and the Minister for Women and Equalities addressed this just half an hour ago.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You and the Prime Minister will be welcome in the Arran district of my constituency, where developers are trying to build over every vineyard, horticultural nursery and agricultural land. Could he point out that the last place to build homes is prime agricultural land, especially in an area where developers have enough permissions to meet the Council's targets for the next 5 years?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right that sustainable development must be at the heart of our planning system, and that's why we're committed to meeting the housing needs of our communities by building homes, the right homes, in the right places, making sure that everyone uses best use of brownfield land, conserving our countryside, but that's also the point that he makes, which is important. As I've been crystal clear, we must protect agricultural land. Food security is incredibly important, and we need our farmers to produce more great British food.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We know the Prime Minister has received advice about the legality of the Israel-Gaza war, that he's had time to consider it, that governments can and do publish such advice. So will he tell the House what steps he is taking to act on that advice in reviewing UK arms sales, in supporting proceedings in the ICJ and ICC, and in exercising the UK vote in the UN Security Council?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we continue to call for Israel to respect international humanitarian law and for civilians to be protected. Too many civilians have been killed, and we want to see Israel take greater care to limit its operations to military targets. These are points that both I and the Foreign Secretary have repeatedly made to Prime Minister Netanyahu. We have previously assessed that Israel is committed and capable of complying with international humanitarian law, and of course we always keep this under review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware of plans by National Grid to build 50-metre-high pylons, a network through much of rural Lincolnshire, which is causing much consternation, particularly in rural villages. Could my right honourable friend assure my residents that when finally ministers consider the consultations that come forward from National Grid, that they will give sympathetic consideration to putting some of the sections underground?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the concerns of his constituents, and he will recognise the balance that we need to strike by making sure that we give our country the energy security that it needs, but do that in a way that is respectful of the impact on local communities. I'll be sure to make sure that ministers take into account the concerns that he's raised and that all the views of his local constituents are taken into account.
Final question, Terry Ali.
Mr. Speaker, given the Prime Minister's and his government's days are numbered and will soon be in opposition, will he use the small amount of time available to him and join the 138 United Nations member states and recognise the state of Palestine?
Mr. Speaker, our position has been consistently clear that we will recognise the state of Palestine when it makes most beneficial sense for the overall peace process. Of course we're committed to an ultimate two-state solution, but in the here and now, what we are calling for is an immediate, sustained humanitarian pause which would allow for the safe release of hostages, including British nationals, and more aid to reach Gaza. And we would urge all sides to seize the opportunity and continue negotiations to reach an agreement as soon as possible.
please, Prime Minister's questions.
That was Prime Minister Rishi Sunak taking questions from MPs in the House of Commons. We're still joined here in our Westminster studio by Cabinet Office Minister Esther McVey and Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Lucy Powell.
Yes, you've been sending your brilliant questions to gbviews at gbnews.com for our panel, because remember, this programme is different. It's all about your questions. Over to you, Chris, for the first one.
Well, we have a first question here. Interesting question here from Ken. And he's emailed asking about Keir Starmer, Lucy Powell. When will he ask a question that's on the state of things in the country rather than troubles in the Tory party?
Well, I think he did that today, as I watch him do every week. He was asking today about the Rwanda plan that the government has, which is incredibly expensive. It's going to cost around £2 million per person to send them to Rwanda. I mean, we could all go and have a nice long holiday in the Ritz in Paris for less than that. So he was asking some big questions about that. He was also asking about the government's plans to release prisoners early, because the government have lost control of prison places. So they now need to release criminals early. So, look, it is Prime Minister's questions. His job is to ask the government how it's getting on with its policies, and the answer usually is not very well, because they are in chaos, they are disunited, but also their policies are expensive and just not working.
OK.
Esther McVey?
What about the questions?
Well, yeah.
To be fair, I think the viewer hit on a good point, because Labour don't have really anything to say. They've always played the man and not the ball, so all they can do is invariably sneer and smear, because they've got nothing really to talk about. And when you look at the impacts of lockdown and COVID, the impacts of what we've got out of, and now actually not even celebrating when there is some good news. Labour is always talking down the country, and I think that's a misstep, and actually need to look at how we've come out of it better than, like, parts of Europe, better than Japan, better than Canada. Actually, let's talk Britain up for a change, I'd say.
Well, Anthony from Staffordshire, he's been in touch and he wants to know this. Why doesn't the government scrap VAT altogether? Support small businesses, support big businesses, support the consumers, leave national insurance alone, scrap VAT instead. Does Anthony have a point?
Well, I've heard this a lot, actually, from the hospitality sector. In fact, I think we were in an event together, Lucy and I, on that, so I get that. But I think what Rishi Sunak has said, and said it very clearly, we are the party that wants low taxes, but once you've spent $400 billion on COVID, $100 billion on cost of living and energy support, you've got to say, when can we bring it down? First thing is bring down inflation, and then we've said it will be national insurance contributions, which we brought down £900 per person, because that's like a double tax on jobs, making it simplistic. But I do have sympathy for bringing down VAT, because I'm a low-tax Tory, so I'd be wanting that next.
Highest tax burden in 70 years.
No, I've said that. I agreed with that.
But Lucy Powell, I can't think of a single tax cut that Labour have announced. I mean, the Labour Party says taxes are too high, bemoans the fact, but what tax would Labour cut?
Well, look, we have got the highest tax burden in 70 years, Gloria, so the Conservative MPs and others can say they're for low taxes, but the reality is, under their watch, taxes have gone up to their highest level in 70 years. And actually, when they wanted to raise national insurance, which was only a few months ago when they originally raised national insurance, they've just recently cut it, we opposed that raise in national insurance, because national insurance is a tax on jobs and a tax on working people, which we felt was the wrong decision at the time. And that's who's bearing the burden of the tax rises of this government. It is ordinary working people with their council tax rises, with their ordinary taxes going up. But the big question is, I think for the Conservative Party now, they've announced that they want to cut national insurance altogether. That's £46 billion of unfunded tax cuts. And I think pensioners will want to know, especially because I think people feel that paying into their national insurance through their life contributes to their pension entitlement.
You can't on one hand talk about the highest tax in 70 years, and as we're bringing it down, then talk about where would that tax come from. So you can't do that. We would be looking at how to bring it down as we get the country on track. Labour has got £28 billion as well that it's got to find annually for its green growth plan. And for pensioners, we have brought in the triple lock. We have helped pensioners for years and years and years. We've given them a significant rise rightly so. Whereas I think, did Labour give at the time? Was it a couple of pound, if that, a couple of pence a week? So please don't talk about pensioners, because we've looked... 78p, we've considerably, by thousands of pounds, looked after pensioners, and rightly so.
Is the plan to get rid of national insurance, and by when?
I couldn't tell you by when, I genuinely couldn't. But for me, making sure that the economy is stable, making sure inflation's coming down, and then making sure that tax comes down. And obviously, as Labour are now the new Thatcherites, talking about Margaret Thatcher, it's a huge surprise to me, but that's what Margaret Thatcher did. Inflation down and then taxes.
Okay. On to one issue here, as to we've had several emails here about dentistry.
Yes.
Andrea from Cornwall writes in to ask, can anyone in the Tory party tell me, and that'd be you, I'm afraid, Esther, when my family and I will get access to an NHS dentist? Our dental practice went fully private in September last year, and my daughter has been on the waiting list for 6 years for a dentist.
And see from Lincolnshire, just to know, you made a very similar point. I've phoned over 100 dentists around the country and still can't get an NHS
needs
dentist.
implants.
Dentistry is a major problem.
Yes.
The plan's not working.
Yeah, absolutely, it's a major problem, and it has been for some time. I've done debates before I went back into be a cabinet minister. I've done debates on that, so I'm pleased to see the extra £200 million that the government's put in, and the outreach work and paying dentists more. But it is a huge problem. Again, something else that went significantly worse during lockdown, but we have to support people, and this is a big issue that we've got to get right. So I welcome the support, but we need more.
Yeah. Would it be any better under Labour?
Well, look,
would Sue and Andrea be able to get a dentist?
Yes, it would be better under Labour, because we've got a fully funded plan to release 800,000 new dentists. NHS
from what? What are you paying for it with?
Yes, we are. It's fully funded, and we fully accounted for that. And dentistry is a massive issue, because it has got impossible. I mean, it's got impossible under this Conservative government to get a dentist appointment. And that's not just bad for those individuals who then can't get their dental health done in an affordable way, but it's also costing the NHS dearly as well, because some shocking statistics that I read recently, and my husband's an A&E doctor, so I hear this from him too, is that the majority of children coming into our A&E departments is with tooth decay and tooth problems. So it's costing acute care a great deal to deal with the prevention that could otherwise be happening if we could just get people the oral health care that they need, because child tooth decay is awful.
And we all agree on that, and that's why I say the steps that the government has taken in the last couple of months is welcome, but more needs to be done. So I accept that. And then you've got to get the dentist, hence we've given them a bonus to come
and work, because you're not going to get them overnight. You change the contracts and the payments. I mean, my dentist tells me this all the time. He was telling me it through
but it was
my NHS
the Labour's
dentist.
Ones that we've actually increased. Now, we've had a lot of time to do that, I get that. But
over the 14 years, it's got worse and worse and worse. And the contracts, you're not paying dentists enough to do that work. There's no incentive there. That's why they're going private.
We need to grow the economy, get the economy on track, because you can't pay for this if you don't have the money. So this is what we're doing. As I said, 500 billion we spent on lockdown, and now we've all got to come together to get over that. And the first thing would be dentistry is a major
But how
point.
much did the Liz Truss budget cost as well? I mean, you tank the economy, you crash the economy. We're all paying more for that in higher mortgage rates,
Lucy, I just looked to Wales, which is Labour-run. The NHS is worse. In fact, they're now sending people to England because the NHS is so bad there. Look at what's happening to farmers as Labour race to net zero.
It's not
going to cost
on the NHS
5,500 farmers' jobs.
It's not true.
And the 20 mile an hour in Labour-run Wales is costing £4 billion. I am, and that's what Labour do to the economy.
Do you know what? Mark Drakeford's got nothing to do with my mortgage rates going up hundreds of pounds a month, and all the viewers here. Interest rates gone through the roof because decisions you took when you lost control of the economy, crashed the economy. We're all paying a price for that now.
Labour-run Wales is worse.
On the economy?
Worse on everything, absolutely of measure, as is Birmingham City Council run by Labour, and as is London run by Labour. So please, Labour would tank the economy for the whole country.
There's many good places run by Labour as well.
James from Crystal Palace. James from Crystal Palace is noting that the Safety of Rwanda bill is going through the House of Lords today.
Oh, yes.
Or at least whether it comes back to the House of Commons again. We'll wait to see if they accept the changes or the reverse there by the House of Commons. He says, the PM says he's going to stop the boats estimate, Faye. What's he done? What's he got to say about the number of crossings today? I mean, 3,000 so far this year. It's not working, is it? And can Rwanda work?
I believe Rwanda will work. I kind of wish that we didn't have those wrecking measurements that we had, votes in the House of Lords, fundamentally by Labour. Labour's voted against stopping this illegal migration at least 70 times, and we've now got to get it through, because as the National Crime Agency said, the Rwanda will be a deterrent. I think that's really important. And the other mentions that Rishi Sunak in Question Time mentioned today, and that's, extra support with France to stop it, all of the agreements we've got, like Albania, to send people back. So, yes, it's one of a set of measurements. And, of course, we've stopped the boat crossings, as the Prime Minister said, by 30%. A lot more to be done. But remember, we're the only party dealing with illegal and legal migration. Labour doesn't have an answer on this at all. Labour is wanting it'll go worse under Labour. No plan, Lucy.
No plan is what the Tories
There weren't illegal boat crossings before this government came in. They've gone through the roof, year on year on year. There used to be a few dozen a year. A few years ago. Now there are tens of thousands a year. It's gone through the roof
around the world.
It's gone through the roof because you've lost control of immigration. You've lost control of managed migration as well. And the Rwanda plan, it won't work. That's why we've been voting against it.
So
£500 million.
Can I just ask a question?
£500 million for 300 people.
Lucy, can I just ask a question? When people come over illegally,
they should be returned.
Straight away. And when they don't have their passport, because frequently they destroy their passport, so we don't know where they're from. How is Labour sending them back to somewhere where they come from? There has to be a third country, a safe third country. Otherwise, you won't be sending anybody anywhere.
But you're not sending anybody anywhere.
And that's because of all the opposition from lefty lawyers, lefty politicians who vote against it. So let's hope
how
this
big
goes
is the backlog
through.
now? You're not even processing them.
We need this.
And you don't even call it a backlog anymore. The Home Secretary now calls it a queue.
Can I ask
paying millions of pounds
Lucy,
a day.
if it
but
worked.
Just let me answer. You're paying millions of pounds a day to house people to house people in expensive hotels because you're not actually processing their applications, so you don't know whether they're here illegally or not.
So
deal with the backlog, and then when you've got a decision, get the returns arrangements and send people back. That's what we would do, and we deal with the criminal gangs who are driving people over here in the first place.
So we have got that backlog down, that's correct. And we have got the answer.
The backlog went massively up first, and then you've tiny bit got it down.
Right, so what would you say it works and the planes go off and Rwanda's working and it's been a deterrent and we're sending people away? Would Labour keep the Rwanda policy once the planes are off and if it were working? Would you keep the Rwanda policy if it were working?
Well, it won't work.
No, my question is if it did. So that's all we need to know.
But it's so expensive.
Even if it would work.
We think that for the £500 million, £500 million, for your own figures say that will send 300 people. 300 people going to Rwanda for £500 million.
This is nonsense.
That's £2 million per person.
Lucy, this is nonsense.
It's not your own figures.
No.
They're your own Home Office figures.
No, it's uncapped and we're sending as many people as Rwanda.
Your own figures predict 300.
I am going to draw
fantasy politics from Labour.
They're your own Home Office figures.
Do let us know what you think. Two competing views on how to solve...
Soft on immigration, Labour.
Right.
Lost control of immigration, Tories, but anyway.
You're letting more people in, as you know.
Right, OK. Mark has been in touch. Please could you ask your guests, Mark, fantastic question, but do let us know where you're from next time, how much longer they think people can afford the extortionate levels of council tax. We don't know where you're from, Mark, but I suspect this figure is not untypical. He says, I now pay almost £9 a day. That is absurd. Now, that's the high rates of council tax, which, by the way, I felt particularly when I lived outside London, much, much higher for a cheaper property. It's still going to be the same high rates of council tax under Labour. You're not going to suddenly give loads of cash to local government, are you?
Let's not just make it about us when we're not the ones putting council tax up. The government has raised the cap.
Birmingham is Labour-led. Birmingham.
There's particular problems in Birmingham, particular historic problems. But what's happened? Local government funding has gone through the floor. So local government is only partly funded by your council tax. It's also partly funded by central government based. It should be based on need, but it's not based on need. And this government changed the formula so that the better off areas, usually the Tory areas, now get more of the central government funding. The worse off areas with the highest need get less of that local government funding. To try and plug the gap in their own underfunding of things like social care and looked after children that the government are doing, they were the ones who put up the cap this year, the amount that local authorities are allowed to increase it by 5%. And local government have had no choice but that, because they've seen their funding cut year after year as demand has gone up for social care and the things that they're responsible for.
Who's behind the increase in council tax?
Well, definitely the social care needs extra support. We've seen that.
Where's your plan?
So £600 million has just gone into that to support that.
But it was cut by £3 billion.
Hang on a sec. And then extra support has gone into the councils to support them in different ways. I look now at the sort of 8.3 billion for road surfacing and potholes, so more money is going in. But I will look at Birmingham, which was Labour-run, an IT system that shouldn't have been there, get Commonwealth Games that they shouldn't have done, we're told not to go for.
Well, that was Andy Street.
What they've done with AZ
Your
IT
great
system,
Manchester Mayor was that.
so the taxi bills that were being paid, so badly run, and it's now going to its constituents for a 20% increase in council tax. Don't agree with that, and as I said, that's what you get from a badly run council. But times are hard, I get that, and that's why the government's handed out 600 million to support.
Mark, I'm not sure we've got a clear answer from either on whether your council tax will fall, but just explanations of why it's so high.
Well, it's going up because of what the government have been doing.
Frank from Teesside, Lucy. Now, he asked, what's your plan, Labour's plan for growth? Now you've rolled back your growth plan of £28 billion of green investment.
Well, we've still got a really ambitious growth plan. We're looking at investing at least 5.5 billion a year over 10 years in that transition to green. And per capita, that is actually more ambitious than what the Biden has done in America. So that's fully costed. It's going to create thousands of jobs, especially outside of London and the South East, around the country, in the places that once built Britain. And
like Teesside.
Teesside, North Wales, Scotland, coastal communities, but also greening that steel industry as well. Tidal, carbon capture, all these great technologies of the future. We've got that plan for growth, and we think that will do what this country needs to do, which is win that global race, and the Conservatives are just turning their back on it.
Maria from Blackpool, she asked an interesting question. I don't know if we'll be able to help her, but I guess it's one for you, Esther. I would like to ask Prime Minister Rishi Sunak what he discussed with Barack Obama when he visited him in Downing Street earlier this week.
Very interesting. I'd say we were all intrigued when it was a little tour around Europe. Well, I know what I'd be asking Barack Obama. I don't know what Rishi asked him, but I know what I'd be asking about him. Joe Biden, give us a break. That man can't stand again. Are the rumours true that your wife might actually want to run as the Democrat candidate? So I guess I'd be intrigued to know that. Is that what he's doing, reaching out around the world? But obviously...
Do you worry if Trump wins, there'll be a problem for the Labour government if Labour win the election?
I'd like to see two better candidates to lead America, to be honest. But more importantly, I guess I'd hope he was asking about support for Ukraine. I hope he was asking about trade deals, and I hope he was asking about NATO and the support there.
OK, and I guess if the polls are right, then you will be hosting those leaders and former leaders in number 10. But for now, we've run out of time, but we've thoroughly enjoyed your company. Another
Lucy, we did a good one there. We were live. Lucy, we were live.
Coming up, it's Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily, who are going to tell us what's in their show.
Will any government anywhere in the world ever host a referendum ever again? It's only been a couple of weeks since Leo Varadkar lost 2 referendums by enormous margins when he thought he'd win them, and now he's out as Irish Taoiseach. Also, the Australian Aboriginal referendum did not go the way the government thought it would just a few months ago. It seems there's a revolt against what governments want their populations to do.
Yes, will governments stop asking if they don't get the answers that they're expecting? Also, one story that caught my eye is that a Cambridge college, one of the university's colleges, has drawn up plans to scrap their Anglican choir altogether in favour of more diverse music. I think this is a travesty, a break with tradition, but we'll get to the bottom of what's going on.
What a thrilling show, Emily and Tom. Well, that's all from me and Gloria for a bit.
And MPs are going, I shouldn't say on holiday because they'll contest that. They're having a parliamentary recess. We will be back for Prime Minister's question. I think it's the 17th of April.
Yes.
Happy Easter. Until then, from me. You've seen Chris lots.
You've been watching this. The PMQs Live with me and Gloria.
brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Today we've got some rain spilling its way south and eastwards, the best of the brightness up towards the northwest and fairly mild across the country. Now that's down to this weather front that we've got sitting through central parts of the country, bringing this milder air across the UK. But as it eases from the northwest, you can see some brighter skies pushing in to Western Scotland and Northern Ireland through this afternoon. So that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine. Quite grey, quite murky and cloudy with rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts through the day across England and Wales, but down towards the southeast it should stay dry. We'll see some brightness with highs of 16 or 17 Celsius. Through Wednesday evening then, that rain continues to filter its way south and eastwards, tending to die out as it does through the night. A lot of cloud left in its wake, though, some pockets of mist and fog developing and a few clear spells, particularly for the north and the northwest. But later in the night you can see this cloud and rain gathering across Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, so turning quite wet and windy by the end of the night. But typically temperatures around where they should be for this time of year, a generally mild night. Wet and windy start to the day, though, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. That rain continuing to pile in through the day. The winds picking up across the country, turning quite windy in the far northwest, but a breezy picture elsewhere. Bright and breezy for England and Wales. Some sunny spells from time to time, just making it feel a little fresher than today, but still highs of 15 or 16. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's still time to win our giveaway packed with seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash to make your bank account bloom. Plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package, including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But also,
be
it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 20th of March.
The Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar has in the past hour resigned. This follows 2 enormous referendum defeats in Ireland, where the public rejected the government's attempts to change constitutional language around the family and the role of women.
An investigation is launched at the hospital which recently treated Princess Kate and King Charles. At least 1 member of staff is suspected of trying to access Kate's medical records. We'll bring you the very latest.
Are we about to see a drop in interest rates? Fingers crossed, all eyes will be on the Bank of England's announcement tomorrow, after today's sensational, unexpected, bigger than expected drop of inflation. The rate is now at its lowest level for more than 2 years.
I've never seen you more excited, Tom. Are Britain's diversity and inclusion programmes backfiring? The